The big news story over the past week has been the ongoing situation in Iran. It's turned life upside down in a good chunk of the Middle East, and we're already starting to feel the economic consequences of it here back home. And even though most of us are thousands of miles away from the actual fighting, there are growing concerns that at least some of it could make its way back here. Law enforcement agencies and government officials around the United States are warning of potential issues from sleeper cells inside of the country. Now, before we get too deep in all this, I do want to start off by saying that I don't know of any specific threat at the moment. The thing is that sleeper cells are constantly present in pretty much every country on the planet, so I'm not trying to scare the crap out of anybody by saying that an attack is imminent or anything like that. But with everything going on in the world right now, we are at a heightened state of risk. So I wanted to give y'all an idea of some things to look out for and also things that you can do to at least give yourself a better chance of making it through a bad situation alive. Now, as far as how many sleeper cells or sleeper cell agents we have in the country, there's not really any published official documentation on that, but based off of how open and porous borders have been, a few years back and how long that lasted, it is reasonable to conclude that there's probably a significant amount. As far as the actual kinds of attacks that they could carry out, probably the most likely is going to be some sort of lone wolf incident. We actually already had something like that in Austin this past weekend. And those can be from folks who are linked to either Iran or an organization that is affiliated with Iran, or it could just be a normal everyday person who maybe watched the wrong kinds of reels on TikTok and Instagram, maybe got radicalized a little bit, and now they want to do something stupid. These, since they only involve one person, they're kind of limited in the scope of the damage they can do, but what makes them dangerous is that they're very hard to see coming. Lone wolf, by their nature, they're alone, and as long as they haven't talked to anybody about the stupidity that they want to unleash, then there's not going to be really any chatter to pick up and then catch them. So just the fact that they kind of fly under the radar is what makes them dangerous. Then after that, we have kind of more intermediate attacks. Those might involve like, trucks hurting people, also repurposing certain things like pressure cookers, things like that. And those can do a significant amount of damage. Usually those types of events will target, gatherings, holidays, stuff like that. And then, kind of on the bigger scale, we would have major attacks. That could be something like a dirty bomb. It could also be another 2001 type situation. And thankfully, those are pretty darn rare. I mean, we haven't ever had like a dirty bomb attack, thank goodness. But those, they require a lot of money, a lot of resources, a lot of planning and manpower. And with that, it's kind of the opposite of a lone wolf. While they could cause an extreme amount of damage, they're also easier to catch because the more people you involve, the more chance there is for intelligence agencies to pick up communications from them. Now, as far as how to stay safe from those different kinds of events, the most basic thing that we can all do is just exercise good situational awareness. That'll allow us to hopefully anticipate bad situations and also avoid problem areas once they start to go down. A good way to start with all that is to just keep up with international, national, state, and local news. That way you kind of have a more well-rounded idea of what's going on in the world, and if there are things kind of going on that could promote a situation like that, or also it'll also help you be aware of potential targets around you. In addition to, just local news sources, also try to keep an eye on local, like, online forums, social media groups, places like nextdoor.com. Then I know that where I live, we have a lot of different Facebook groups that deal with, stuff going on in my hometown and then also the area around it. Those can be very good places to gather intel that maybe isn't on your local news. Then beyond that, also look for suspicious activity. If you live in a given area or you spend a lot of time somewhere, you know kind of the baseline. You know what's normal. You know how people behave and the things that they do. You also know kind of patterns of what law enforcement does. Like where I live, I can really tell when they're stepping up enforcement of certain things just because I see more police around than what I normally do. So, looking out for suspicious people, that can help you spot potential issues. And then also, if you see a lot more law enforcement around and they're not pulling people over left and right, then you know that maybe there's a situation going on that they're trying to keep track of. And that would be a good time to raise your situational awareness even more. Then after that, you want to have a solid communications plan. The most basic way to do that is to have a USB battery bank and a charging cable in your vehicle, at your office, so that no matter what happens, you can always keep your phone up and running. That way, you can keep track of what's going on around you. You can keep in contact with loved ones. And then, just in case for some reason cellular and internet services go down, then emergency radios are very good to have. I actually prefer to use something like either a GMRS or ham handheld radio because, in addition to being able to communicate two ways, they can also pick up your local FM stations. They can also pick up NOAA weather frequencies. So they allow you to communicate back and forth and also gather important information from official channels. But with those, it is important to understand that unless you're part of some sort of repeater network, the range on them is going to be limited. So you do need to have plans in place so that you and your loved ones know what to do if you can't get into contact. That includes who picks up which kid from school, have alternate meetup locations in case you can't reach your home, and also know the red lines that would cause you to go to those alternate locations. Like, if this happens in this certain part of town, then we don't try to go home, we just go straight here instead. Everybody should know that. It should just be second nature. Then it's also a good idea to have an out-of-state contact because there are times where maybe two cell phones in one particular area that's overloaded can't communicate with each other, but maybe they can get a call out to somebody in another state, and then maybe they can get a call to that other person. So, kind of have a relay person out of state, and also sometimes text messages can get through where phone calls can't. So, just know all the different little workarounds that you can use to communicate in case just direct phone-to-phone communications become unusable. Then after that, you also want to exercise good operational security. A good place to start with that is just manage your online presence. Like, don't get into like altercations or arguments on like Facebook or forums or anything like that. That's just a very good way to make yourself memorable when maybe you don't want to be. Then when you're out in public, try to be the gray man as much as possible. Blend in, dress like the way that normal people would. The temptation for a lot of preppers is to dress in like all this tactical gear if they think something might go down. And really, that could just make you a target for either the bad guys, or it could draw attention to you from police where they think that you're a potential threat, and then they miss the other guy who's actually trying something. So be the gray man. Don't dress like you're trying to be some sort of tier 1 operator or any nonsense like that. Then as far as when you're out and about, of course, always be aware of suspicious behavior. If there's somebody who's, wearing a long, thick coat and it's starting to be like 80, 85 degrees outside like it is here, that's probably a guy that you want to keep an eye on. Also, when you go somewhere, just kind of a basic thing is knowing where the exits are. My family and I, we went to a restaurant here this past week for my mom's birthday, and the room that we were in, I was kind of struggling to find the exit. It had kind of had a rustic vibe to it and all that, and the emergency exit actually kind of blended into the decor of the room. And if we needed to find that door during the middle of a situation where everybody's panicking, it might not have turned out too well. So as soon as you go somewhere, especially if it's a place that you're gonna be parked at for a little while, know where those emergency exits are so that you can get out quickly if you need to. Then also be sure to have your EDC bag with you at all times. I know that right now mine is hanging up behind me because it's decent decor for my set here, but I have been taking this a lot more places than what I normally do. And inside of an EDC bag like that, you just want to have your basics taken care of. A little bit of extra food and water. Also, defensive tools, things like spare magazines. Also, medical equipment. Like inside of that bag, I have a ratcheting tourniquet. I also have hemostatic bandages. And those aren't things that you use, for just normal boo-boos. Especially with the hemostatic bandages, those can be a little bit problematic in other ways. But, I mean, if somebody's bleeding out, then those could be the only things that would save their life. Then after that, you also want to have some breathing protection. Probably the most basic form of that is just going to be an N95 mask. Those are nice because they do filter out a lot of different particulates and they kind of collapse down. If you want to have something a little bit more advanced, like in your car or in an office survival kit you can squirrel away somewhere, then that's not bad to have either. But kind of the next layer up from your normal EDC is your vehicle. And with that, just start with keeping your gas tank above half full. If a situation goes down, you want to be able to get wherever you need to. For most of us, it's going to be removing ourselves and our loved ones from that bad situation. And you don't want crap to go down when you have an eighth of a tank left and your safe location is, like 45 minutes or 2 hours away. Keep that tank half full so you have flexibility to get wherever you need to. And also, it's not a bad idea to go ahead and fill up your gas cans. I did some of that right before that winter storm that we had. I believe it was towards the end of January. But if you have any gas cans, used for lawnmower or anything like that are half full, go ahead and top those off so that if you need to, you can use that gas in your vehicle. Also, take care of any basic maintenance that you need to do, like if you have bald tires, take care of those. If your battery's starting to get sluggish, get a new one. If you need an oil change, anything like that, just so if you need your vehicle, it's actually going to run. And then also have some basic supplies in there. I like to use my vehicle sort of as an extension of my EDC kit. I'll have some bigger items that I don't necessarily want to lug around inside of that, and also have some redundancy. While, for example, I have a grill purifier bottle on my EDC bag, I do have other ways to purify water inside of my vehicle kit as well. It just gives you more options if you need it. Now, if you're somewhere and something actually does go down, get out of there as quickly as you can. Don't be filming or anything like that. That's just a very good way to end up a victim. And kind of my rule is only engage if you have to do so to reach safety. Y'all got to understand, my goal is to protect my wife and my son. And if I'm with them, my main objective is to get them out of that situation. If the bad guy gets in front of me while I'm trying to do that, then whatever happens, happens. But I'm not going to jeopardize their safety to go deal with the bad guy. Now, as far as defensive tools are concerned, if you have a concealed carry, then actually carry the dang thing. It's not going to do you a bit of good sitting in your bedroom if you're somewhere and something goes down. If you have it on you, then you have the option to either use it or not use it based off of what would be best in the particular situation that you're in. As far as the actual type of weapon is concerned, if it's concealed carry, it's going to be a handgun. And for those, I prefer compacts. Your little micros and your subcompacts, they have a limited capacity. They're also more difficult to shoot at longer distances. And then your full size, they're just a booger to conceal. I've tried to conceal carry a full size before, and it was the most uncomfortable situation ever, and I don't enjoy doing it. A compact, though, it's a good compromise. It has the concealability of your smaller guns, but still has a decent capacity and is easier to shoot at a longer distance than your tiny little guns will be. I know I carry a CZ-P01, which is about the size of a Glock 19, and I mean, hitting like a steel silhouette at 30 yards really isn't all that difficult. And I mean, also, since there's a little bit of weight there, there's better recoil management, faster follow-up shots. I just really like that particular size of guns. Now, if you have something smaller and you're kind of stuck with it, I mean, you want to use what you got, but if you can't get a new gun, maybe consider getting some extended magazines, so at least you have a little bit of a larger capacity. And a good thing about those extended magazines is that many times they give you a place to put your pinky, which can help you control the gun a little bit better too. Now, when it comes to long guns, an AR-15 is pretty much always going to be my first choice when it comes to these defensive type situations. They have a very good capacity. The recoil on them is low enough that you're going to be able to do very quick follow-up shots. And also, even though it is a smaller round in, when it comes to rifles, you're still going to get a lot more damage with one of those than you would handguns. So they are very good for that. Then you got some folks that'll opt for a shotgun for defense instead of a rifle, and those can be extremely effective, especially if you're using buckshot or slugs. I just tend to keep mine more or less for home defense because, lower capacity, higher recoil, things like that. If I have any sort of a choice at all, I'm probably going to grab my AR. Then also be sure to carry some spare magazines, and if you have anything like some practice mags that you just tend to use at the range, go ahead and keep those loaded at all times so that if you need them, you can grab them. Another thing to consider with defensive weapons is you want to make sure that they are cleaned and well maintained. You don't want to have to, use your weapon only to find out that it's all jammed up because it has dust bunnies the size of real bunnies in the bore and different kinds of crud and crap from inside of your purse or whatever has gotten into the slide and all that. Make sure they're clean, make sure they're well maintained so that they'll actually work if you need them. And then also be sure that your firearms and your magazines are situated so that they will be easy to access and use. Of course, if you have kids around, you want to take steps to make sure that they don't hurt themselves or get a hold of anything that they shouldn't. But a good thing to do is just go ahead and load up like your load bearing equipment. Like over there, I have an Alice rig that has rifle and handgun mags in it ready to go. If you could get something with like level 4 body armor, that would be even better because those level 4 plates, they're going to stop rifle rounds, which that is what tends to be used in those sort of, especially like lone wolf type situations. And then it's also a good idea to have just basic supplies at home. That way, if there's a situation or potential for a situation, you don't have to go out in public and put yourself at risk when you don't have to. Of course, we all know that we should have things like food, water, medications, and then hygiene and sanitation supplies. But now would be, just a good time to go ahead, look at that, make sure that you have what you think you do, and that way, if something goes down, you don't have to leave the house. Now, earlier in the video, I mentioned that we're already feeling economic consequences from this situation in Iran, and things really, they're probably only going to get worse. So if you want to see the main types of items that you should be buying before April 1st of this year, based off of everything we have going on, then click here. Or if you want to see the 10 most important kinds of preps to have to survive pretty much any situation, then click here. Thank y'all for stopping by. Y'all have a good one.